So, thank you very much, Janet, for those kind words and a great introduction. And Hitesh, wow, half of it's true. I'm incredibly honoured to be here this evening. It's a very special moment for me because 33 years ago I was sitting in one of your seats, normally at the back, not paying an enormous amount of attention or paying less attention than I should have been. And 33 years passes and here I am standing here, and it's it's exciting and daunting at the same time, partly because I think I've press ganged about 100 people here this evening who had no choice, but they did say yes. But the rest of you did have a choice, and I'm delighted that you're all here this evening. Olivia Rainford, where are you? Who runs the alumni program and runs alumni relations and is responsible for bringing me back into London South Bank University. Olivia asked me to give a quick skip through of my academic career, and it's so much easier to describe my academic career now that my children have all gone through their studies. And that's partly because I had a pretty disastrous academic career. It just didn't work for me. It didn't work for me in the classroom. It didn't work. I couldn't blame it on the size of schoolroom or classroom. I couldn't blame it on schooling, parenting. I just couldn't connect with the practical, prescriptive style of education that was kicking around when I was growing up. Where I responded much more was in the playground and in the more business playground environment later on in my career. So as I grew up, I felt surrounded by really smart people that tended to put their hand up much faster than me and hand in their homework faster than me, and I continually ended up in the bottom quartile of the classroom. However, I amassed, with a combination of retakes, 7 O-levels, not bad, and then eventually came to London South Bank University with my 1 A-level in government and politics, and I thought I'd just throw up this application form. That's it there, government and politics. Hold on, there's a little, there you can see it. I'm very proud of that. By the way, I got an F in English. And at today's academic currency levels, I think this is an E and an F or a B and a C, right? I would have thought so, something like that. And I am incredibly grateful to this university for giving me the chance to study here, because in fact my qualifications, the level of my qualification wouldn't have allowed me to get here, and I pleaded with the course director to give me a shot. She did. She said yes, thank God for that, and I came on the course. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I certainly didn't feel like I wanted to get into the family business, which would have been 24/7, 7 days a week. For me, it felt like I needed to try and explore something more, but I didn't know what it was, and I wasn't ready to get into work. And this place, the university, gave me a little bit of time to think that one through. And through that process, it gave me the confidence to ask more questions, get a sense of the business world. And I remember sitting here, and some of the most engaging conversations or some of the most engaging talks were about business. It was people who came in who had business experience. That's what really drew me into that world. So it's even more special, if you like, for me to be able to have the opportunity to give this talk. So, with an HND in business studies, who's got anyone HND in business studies here? Thank you, sir. I have another offer too. HND in business studies. I decided to move into the world of business, and that's where I had the good fortune to perform and work. And when I was growing up, I must say there were 2 things that I was addicted to. One was television, the other one was food. And thankfully, TV opened the door for me to develop the early phase of my career. And since then, these are the companies that I've had the good fortune to work with over that 32 years in these businesses. 16 roles, working in teams of and leading teams of 2 and 3 to 8,500 and running businesses in their low millions to billions. And so the talk tonight is really centered on my personal experience. It's not an academic observation, it's more a business observation. It's the things that I see that I think hopefully are interesting to you. And I feel very strongly that this 5-letter word is a very toxic word, and a word that can get in the way of the way in which we work together and the way in which we relate to each other, personally as well as professionally. And increasingly over the last 10 to 15 years, I've seen it appear. And my question was, has it always been there, and I just feel it more, or are there things that are occurring in our society that are drawing us more to the world of maybe? Because maybe slows us down, maybe kills small businesses and destroys large businesses eventually. And I think in our own personal lives, we can get incredibly caught with frustration and angst and disappointment if we keep on hearing that word. So my real message this evening is I would love us all to be yes evangelists. That's what I'm really pushing for today, and to challenge yourselves around this whole area of maybe and why we should be trying to avoid it. Now, last year I took a different turn career-wise, and I decided to take a step from a full-time corporate role and move into a plural portfolio world. And that was an opportunity for me to take investment positions in a number of companies where I felt that my skill set could help them get to yes much more quickly. And I'm delighted that some of those businesses are here tonight. And I think this world challenges me because it enables me to draw on all my experiences over the last 30 years and help these businesses get there much faster. That's the intention. Yeah, I'm really happy in the Q&A to answer any of these questions. I keep on moving just to disappoint the cameraman, just to make it harder for him. Okay. Can we just put this issue to the test? I'm going to give you 2 scenarios. Scenario number 1 is the work environment. Okay, so some of you are not in the work environment, so let's just call it a formal environment, and I'm going to try and play some extremes here. But this, if you have been in a work environment or you have been in an informal environment, maybe some of the people you come across are going to be bosses like this, or a work environment where questions like this come. Am I going to get a pay rise? Are we going to have a party? Are there going to be redundancies? Can I come with you to the meeting? One of the things that I was incredibly frustrated with in the early phase of my career is I always felt I kept on doing the work, but someone was getting the credit for it. And I wanted to continue to find ways of muscling my way into meetings that seemed to be difficult to penetrate. And, you know, the answers that you'll get, you may get some yeses, of course you will, from that kind of questioning. But some of the answers you're going to get are going to be, it depends, I'll get back to you, maybe, not sure. Good question, great question, fantastic question, let me get back to you. So I have a position which is that yes and no and maybe is not a midway point between these 2 words. In fact, it's just stopped at the entry of no, pushing to get in. When I hear it, all I hear is no. That's the way my brain thinks. And so I think with that in mind, what I'd like to do is give you a couple of observations on why I think this has occurred and why I think this is becoming increasingly more prevalent, and give you some possible tips to find ways of avoiding the world of maybe. And it's always interesting when issues begin to appear in society, in culture. So this is Jack Johnson, who wrote a song called Flake, and maybe always, or almost always means no. So I've given you a corporate work environment. I'd like to suggest that we try this maybe exercise with something a little bit more personal. Here's Ryan Gosling with Michelle Williams and not a particularly happy movie called Blue Valentine. Thank you. That's my son. Thanks. Good teamwork. One of them, who helped me with the slides. Both of them did. Now, imagine getting these questions. Imagine asking these questions. Do you love me? Well, I won't read them out. You can read them. That's the toughest. Mum, did you record the footy? You do not want to give a maybe answer to that. But the point is, in our personal lives, we feel an enormously more connected emotion when we hear an answer. And you can't unhear an answer like maybe to any of these questions. You can't unhear an answer that isn't clear, isn't emphatic, isn't strong. And I know I've given you extremes, but I think that what I'm trying to propose and what I'm trying to suggest is that there are ways in which you can ask the right question, in which you can position yourself to be in a much stronger place to get the answers that you're looking for. There's a social media app that doesn't have maybe anywhere. This is not my account, by the way. Just want you to know that. I conducted a little bit of research, but this is a very successful business that has a clear left and no, yes or no. So I'm arguing that maybe slows you down. I'm arguing that it sucks oxygen out of the room. I'm arguing that we can take a little bit more control and find a way of getting more to yes. And I wanted to give you one quick example of an email that we received from one of the businesses. Let me see if it comes up on this slide. We've been very discreet. Just read that if you will. I'll give you a second to read it. What do you think that? To me, that's a no. And what I'm saying is that in the electronic world, where the face-to-face has become much harder, we're getting bombarded with a lot of maybes. I think this could still convert, by the way, to a business and a partnership. It could still convert to a business and a partnership, but clearly this kind of thing affects businesses because small businesses have a tremendous way of adapting. That's what they're really good at. And many of you in the room, and I've met some of you this evening, run small businesses. And you can deal with no. I've seen entrepreneurs, I've seen businesses deal with no. They get on with it. Something doesn't work, they find another way. But this world, it's much harder to react because you're waiting. You're not sure what you're learning. And that's part of the challenge with this issue. So, I'd love us all to be yes evangelists. That's what I'm pitching for. Ditch the word maybe and accept the word no, but with some conditions. And I'll come on to those conditions later on. So I would like to suggest that there are three things that I've observed over the last 10 to 15 years that I think have precipitated this issue. And one of them is to do with data. And data worship and data, just the overload of data that we're facing. And it's not just in our normal business world, it's not in our work environment, it's in our personal environment. The level of mail, search, social media, we all have the opportunity to be creators, curators, we can critique. So this information that we're all being asked to consume and digest, and in many regards become experts at a position, at a particular debate, you'd think is giving us a much better chance of getting to a solution much more quickly. But I don't see that. I see data overload creating more noise, more confusion, more debate, and it's proving harder and harder for people to have a very clear opinion and a clear conclusion. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard of this acronym GAFA, but the 4 largest global data brokers are these 4 businesses. In fact, they're 4 out of the 5 largest companies in the world. And this is their business. It's all about scooping up data, presenting data, controlling data, and using that data to get a greater insight. Not only do we love it, because a lot of the tools that we use in our daily lives are free at the point of use, what's not to like about that, but so does the investment industry. And just to give you a sense of how these businesses have grown over the last 10 years, if you include Microsoft in the top 5 businesses, and this is market cap, US market cap, they're the largest companies in the world. And the transformation over the last 10 years has been pretty significant. So the investment community love what they do. We consume data like we've never done before, predominantly on mobile devices. It's giving us all an opinion, and we're seeing these organizations setting the agenda. For some of you, you may have noticed the Facebook news agenda with the US election, and how there's been quite a lot of criticism around how Facebook have drawn a news position with the Trump campaign. Now, I also wanted to make some reference to management consultants, and I hope I'm not going to be critical of any of you if you're management consultants in the room, but management consultants have played a very significant role over the last 15 to 20 years in designing organizational shape. And those organizational shapes, particularly over the last 10 years, has been to find ways of capturing this data. And many businesses have been told that data is the oil of the 21st century revolution, in the same way as oil was in the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century. So businesses are being advised by management consultants to design their structures to capture it, and in many regards find ways of organizing themselves that they listen to the data. And part of that restraining, part of that structure has meant you begin to see governance appear, procurement appear, outsourcing appear, flatter structures appear. And I think that has pushed us to much more of a harder environment where people can express themselves, opinions can be formed, and the individual can get things to happen, can make things happen. So what I think I've seen, certainly over the last 10 years, is a very different shape in what a company looks like. Always on working, shallow problem solving, flatter structures, careers that appear to be projects rather than long-term opportunities, outsourcing a lot of the component parts of the business and making it much harder to get things done. The other thing that I would like to say is something around the decline of the gut and the decline of the gut feel. Because in a data-enabled world, it's quite unpopular to say, you know, I've got this feeling about this particular opportunity, and I think we should be going left rather than right. And I'm arguing that actually gut feel is something that we should be recognizing as a skill based around a set of experiences that all of us have, irrespective of our age. And that we should be listening a little bit more to the gut. And it seems to be, to me, to be increasingly more suppressed and substituted by this data pressure that I think we're increasingly seeing. And I would like to suggest that knowledge has a number of different phases. And I think when you start your career, there's an undeniable truth, which is you don't know. You have a clear path of a lack of knowledge. You enter into a job, you absolutely know you don't know, but over time, you know. And at the latter stage of a career, you amass so many things that you never think will help you solve problems in the future. And that's all about you don't know that you know. And I would like to suggest that this kind of gut feel experience is something we should be much more sensitive towards and recognize as an important component. But it seems to be declining to me. And I think the other thing that we're beginning to see is the rise of the entrepreneur as organizations stifle people, prevent them from expressing themselves, and pushing them towards other opportunities. In this country, certainly over the last 5 years, has been very pro building new businesses, encouraging new businesses. There's tax incentives, there's opportunities for young people to launch their own businesses. And when I was at the early stage of my career, entrepreneurs were few and far between. But increasingly we're seeing people using a gut feel, not having a data set, a complete data set, but believing that there is something over there that is an opportunity, and an entrepreneur seeing it and attempting to tackle that market. A lot of big businesses approach an opportunity in a very sequential way. Ready, aim, fire. They think about something, they plan, they execute. Entrepreneurs don't think that way. Most entrepreneurs think of a solution as ready, fire, aim. Because there isn't the data set there. And so that's why I'm seeing increasingly people who feel restricted inside organizations are moving out of those organizations because the opportunities are there for them to take advantage. The last point I'd like to talk about is interfaces and the incredible deluge of mobile interfaces that we're having. The way in which we communicate with people, with each other, has really changed. And social media, particularly Facebook, has got a lot to do with this. And so we're giving people choices that 20 years ago, I don't think we used to give them. And here's an example. My son was not sure about coming tonight, but he was given an option. And you know it. I mean, for all of you who have worked, who have experienced this on Facebook, maybe really isn't, oh, I'm working on coming. It's, I don't know how to say no, and I'll get to it. And again, I think it's beginning to appear in culture. This is a clip from an animated series called American Dad, and you know, when you get a lot of tentatives, how many of you do get tentatives for meetings? Do you experience that? Thank you, Simon. I've got one over there. You're positive. You expect people are going to turn up. How do you get out of the world of maybe? 3 simple suggestions I'd like to make, and then I'm happy to take some Q&A. The first one is tell people how much you hate it. Talk about it. Talk about it. Certainly in your business world, in your personal world, this is not a word that you are a fan of. And you want to propose some solutions. So if you're struggling and you can't say a definitive yes or no, say no for now. Yes if, no unless. Put some conditions on it, but all of those answers are much better than the world of maybe. The second is become a much better person at asking questions. Really interrogate, question not only the outside world, the business world, but question your organization. Apply the concept of first principle. How do I know that is the case? Just because I've heard it from another colleague. Really challenge yourself, and inside an organization, inside your work environment, find a way of challenging each other in a positive way. For a number of companies I've suggested where I've worked, I applied this at Disney and at Endemol, that we as a team take a truth pill, and it was our ability to have permission to challenge each other without retribution, to really find ways of getting to the best answer by being much more candid. So I really suggest if you're doubting asking a question, 20 to 30% of the rest of the room or the business wants to know the answer to that question. It's so important to really become much more stronger, much more engaged in asking questions. And then lastly, you've got to put time limits on things. You cannot let things slip too long. So really put things into context. Make sure you're much more disciplined on how you can affect that change. But you have to live by those time limits, because otherwise it just won't carry the weight that it needs. So we've spoken a lot about this word. Many of you are in careers, many of you are in work, but also many of you are students here and at the beginning of your journey. And lots of you are going to be thinking about what's my career path, as I did 33 years ago. And I had no clue. And you're going to be worried about whether you're going to get a pass or a fail or an A or an F, or whether you're going to be lucky or unlucky, or whether things are going to work for you. And there's going to be huge challenges, and I'm sure incredible highs. But I wanted to just leave you with a couple of thoughts. And that is that, to me, there are two things that I'd like to always leave people to think about when it comes to the working environment. And that is, how do you work with people? What kind of person do you want to be in a work environment or in a relationship? How much do you give? How much support can you give? How many times can you say yes to help people? And how do I make that work meaningful? And I think they're two very important things for us all to think about when we're working around people. Thank you very much.